Welcome to the second of a two-part series on Northwest France. We're joining Trafalgar in one of their curated holidays called Treasures of France, a guided tour that took us from the beautiful and iconic cityscape of Paris and on to the glorious cathedrals and magnificent chateaux of the Loire Valley. For the second part of our journey, we'll make our way west to the Atlantic coast of France to visit one of the country's most spectacular sites, the medieval monastery of Mont Michel, then drive through the beaches of Normandy to visit the battlefields of World War II, before ending our holiday back in the streets of the French capital to take an insider's tour of the hidden treasures of Paris. So join me in northwestern France. I'm David Celdran, and this is Executive Class. In most countries, a long drive often means a waste of time, but not in northwest France, and especially not in Normandy. This, after all, is what the region is most famous for: the green pastures, family-owned farms, and quaint villages where France's best milk, cheese, cream, and apples come from. Oh, and yes, Normandy is also famous for a couple of other things, and we're approaching one of them. This is Le Mont St. Michel, a medieval Benedictine abbey and UNESCO World Heritage Site that appears as if out of nowhere, like Tolkien's Minas Tirith, except this one on the water. The gravity-defying architectural tour de force that was built to honor the Archangel Michael, who was said to have appeared on the site, was on the same level as Rome, Jerusalem, and Santiago de Compostela. Today, it's tourists, about 3 million yearly, that come to visit. C'est magnifique, as they say in France. This is probably the most magnificent view in the entire country. Now just imagine this: during the Middle Ages, you either had to swim across or wait for low tide to get to the island. Nowadays, it's so much easier. You just have to walk across. So come along with me. There are two ways to get to the island today. The first, via a pedestrian bridge, is the modern and safer way. The second, and more dangerous one, is by walking through the mud flats at low tide, at your own risk. The bay records the highest tides in continental Europe, and because the water rises so quickly, many have drowned and still continue to drown, if not in the water, then in the quicksand, just trying to reach the monastery. But that's never stopped the tourists, and in the older days, the pilgrims, and invading armies from coming. During the 100 Years' War, the strong tides and thick walls of Mont St. Michel, and as many believed, St. Michael's protection, kept the invading English army across the channel at bay. The isolated monastery had no military significance, but it was of immense religious and cultural value, a prized catch for any jealous king or noble. Pilgrims since the 12th century, just as tourists today, reach the gates of the abbey above through the Grandroux, a narrow, crowded gauntlet of people, shops, and inns, before climbing even some more up a series of very steep steps. The walk is symbolic, of course, a stairway to heaven, so to speak, or in our case, the rendezvous point with our Trafalgar guide, a local history expert. After catching your breath on the climb, you lose it all over again upon emerging at the West Terrace. The panoramic view of the coastline beyond will leave you breathless. You don't have to be religious to feel spiritual here. No wonder the monks defended the abbey so militantly. Hell, I wouldn't give any of this up either. A few monks still reside in the abbey today, but the great monastic order of old is gone forever, dissolved in the French Revolution and when Mont St Michel was converted into a prison. The halls are empty, but with a vivid imagination, you could recreate medieval monastic life in your mind. If not, then let Trafalgar's expert guide do the work for you, with detailed accounts of how the monks lived, prayed, fell ill, and inevitably died and were buried in this hallowed place. At sundown, the abbey and the village below begins to empty. Less than 50 residents live within the walls as compared to the 8,000 plus who come to visit daily. The high season for tourists at Le Mont could be stressful, but a different mood envelops the island at twilight, with a stillness, silence, and darkness monks from the Middle Ages might even recognize. Up next, a final look at magnificent Mont St Michel in a different light and from a different perspective. Then we hit the beaches of Normandy to relive the D-Day landings of World War II and the bravery that took place on that fateful day. Our guided holiday through Northwest France and Paris continues after the break.